Look at a map of America, and California looks like just another blocky state, a big rectangle tilted against the Pacific. But look closer. It isn't a rectangle. It's an 800-mile crescent that defies the neat geometry of the West. And here's something most Americans never realize. Every car you buy, no matter where you live, was engineered to meet California's rules, not federal rules. And that's just the beginning. How did a place that was wilderness in 1848 quietly become the operating system for what you drive, what companies disclose, and what the future looks like? The answer isn't politics, it's something far stranger. Every other state in the Union filled gradually. Families migrated west in waves, settled farms, built churches, established towns that grew over generations. Virginia took 170 years to reach statehood. Ohio took 16 years as a territory before joining the Union. The pattern was slow, organic, predictable. California skipped all of that. The gold rush of 1848 triggered the largest sustained migration in American history, and it happened in months, not decades. Fortune seekers from every state and dozens of countries flooded into a remote Pacific territory that most Americans couldn't find on a map. By 1850, just 2 years after gold was discovered at Sutter's Mill, California had enough residents to enter the Union as the 31st state. No territorial period, no gradual filling. The population exploded from roughly 20,000 to over 300,000 in under 3 years. But here's what that speed created: a culture built entirely on transience, risk-taking, and reinvention. Few Californians can say, "My family has been here since the 1700s." Almost everyone is from somewhere else, or descended from someone who was. This created an unusual openness to new ideas and outsiders that persists to this day. The historian Carey McWilliams put it perfectly. In California, lights went on all at once, in a blaze, and they have never been dimmed. That founding psychology explains something crucial about what came later. California would eventually break federal rules when no other state dared, because the culture itself was built by people who had already broken every convention just to get there. Risk wasn't something Californians avoided, it was the reason they existed. But that willingness to act alone would only matter when California faced a crisis so severe that waiting for Washington wasn't an option. By the 1960s, Los Angeles had achieved a grim distinction: some of the worst air quality on Earth. Not among the worst in America, among the worst anywhere. School children couldn't play outdoors. Doctors warned parents to keep kids inside during recess. Visibility wasn't measured in miles, it was measured in city blocks. On the worst days, you couldn't see buildings a few hundred yards away. Streetlights stayed on at midday because the smog was so thick it blocked the sun. The air burned your eyes and scraped your throat. Athletes collapsed during outdoor events. The elderly died in waves during temperature inversions that trapped the pollution in place for days. The geography that made Los Angeles beautiful, a basin surrounded by mountains, blessed with sunshine, had become a death trap. The mountains that framed the city also trapped its exhaust. Every car, every factory, every furnace added to a toxic soup that had nowhere to go. Industries began fleeing. Families with means relocated. The region faced economic collapse. California wasn't being progressive when it acted. It was facing extinction. So the state did something unprecedented. It enacted its own vehicle emission standards before the federal government even had rules. No state had ever regulated an industry this way. The automakers screamed. Washington hesitated. But California pushed forward anyway, because the alternative was watching Los Angeles choke to death. The federal government had two choices: force California to back down, or accept that one state would set its own path. They chose the second option, and in doing so, they accidentally created a monster. When Congress passed the Clean Air Act in 1970, they faced a genuine problem. Automakers couldn't build different vehicles for different states. The cost would be astronomical, the logistics impossible. 50 different emission standards would destroy the American car industry. So Congress made a fateful choice. They granted California a permanent exemption under Section 209B of the Clean Air Act. The state could set stricter standards than the federal government, but only California, and only if conditions were compelling and extraordinary. Since 1970, California has received over 50 waivers under this provision. Not a single one has ever been revoked. But here's what Congress didn't anticipate. Section 177 of the same law allows other states to adopt California's standards instead of federal ones. Over the following decades, 13 states plus the District of Columbia did exactly that. These weren't small states. They included New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. Combined with California, they represented roughly 40% of the American car market. Automakers faced a choice: build two versions of every vehicle, one for California and its followers, and one for everyone else, or just build everything to California specs. The math was obvious. They chose California. The regulatory tail wagged the national dog for over 50 years. This is why the car you drive, whether you bought it in Texas, Kentucky, or South Carolina, was engineered to meet California's emission standards. Not because Congress mandated it nationally, because one state's market was too large to ignore, and fighting that market was more expensive than surrendering to it. California had discovered something powerful. You don't need to pass federal law if you can make federal law irrelevant. To understand why California's regulatory power actually matters, you need to understand California's economic scale. And the numbers are almost impossible to believe. California's GDP reached $4.3 trillion in 2025. That makes it the world's fifth largest economy, behind only the full United States, China, Germany, and Japan. A single American state produces more economic output than the entire United Kingdom, more than France, more than India, more than Canada. And California isn't just large, it's growing faster than almost anyone. In 2024, California's economy expanded at 6%, outpacing the United States as a whole, outpacing China, outpacing Germany. The gap between California and the economies ahead of it is narrowing, not widening. This isn't a large state. This is a global power wearing a state costume. When California sets a rule, it isn't asking global companies to adjust for a regional quirk. It's asking them to satisfy the fifth largest economy on Earth. Companies that want access to 40 million consumers and a $4.3 trillion market don't negotiate with California, they comply. The question is, how did one state build an economy larger than most nations? The answer is hidden in the landscape itself. Pull up a satellite image of California and you'll see something no other state can match. Nearly every American ecosystem compressed into a single border. Start at Death Valley, 282 feet below sea level, the lowest point in North America and the hottest place in the Western Hemisphere. Temperatures regularly exceed 130 degrees Fahrenheit. The ground is cracked white salt. Nothing survives there for long. Now drive 4 hours northwest. You'll reach Mount Whitney, the highest peak in the contiguous United States, at 14,505 feet. Snow-capped, alpine, surrounded by granite spires. The temperature difference between these 2 points can exceed 100 degrees on the same day. But California isn't just extremes. The state contains redwood forests with trees taller than any others on Earth. Deserts that haven't seen rain in years. Mediterranean coastlines with perfect weather year-round. Fertile valleys that stretch for hundreds of miles. Alpine lakes, volcanic landscapes, coastal wetlands. This geographic diversity created something rare, economic diversity that prevented the single industry collapse that destroyed so many American regions. The Central Valley became America's produce aisle, growing over 50% of the nation's fruits and vegetables. The Bay Area became the technology capital of the world. Silicon Valley alone holds over $11 trillion in market capitalization, larger than all but 3 national economies. Los Angeles built the entertainment industry. The ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach handle 40% of American imports. San Diego became an aerospace hub. California never had to choose one path because its geography offered every path simultaneously. When agriculture struggled, technology surged. When one region declined, another boomed. The state absorbed shock after shock that would have flattened any specialized economy. Other states hitched their futures to steel or coal or textiles and watched those industries die. California hitched its future to everything. And that's why it's still growing while the regions that built America's industrial power continue to hollow out. There's another force powering California's economy that rarely gets mentioned in polite company. Immigration on a scale no other state approaches. California has 10.9 million immigrants, 27% of its entire population. The national average is 12%. California more than doubles it. Net immigration averages 134,000 people per year, meaning California absorbs roughly the population of a medium-sized city annually, year after year, decade after decade. Half come from Asia, the Philippines, China, India, Vietnam, reflecting Silicon Valley's insatiable demand for technical talent. Another 49% come from Latin America. Santa Clara County, home to Apple, Google, and Facebook, is 40% foreign-born. San Francisco is 34% foreign-born. Statewide, 45% of California's children have at least one immigrant parent. This creates a feedback loop that other states can't replicate. Immigrants attract more immigrants because communities already exist. A software engineer from Bangalore has cousins in San Jose, friends from university in Palo Alto, a professional network that spans the Bay Area. Moving to California doesn't mean starting over, it means joining a network that's already there. The result is a talent pipeline that feeds California's economy generation after generation. Companies don't just locate in California because the weather is nice. They locate there because the workforce they need already exists, replenished constantly by global migration. But this diversity comes with a cost. California is becoming majority-minority while many other states remain predominantly white. The state that looks least like traditional America is also the state that sets rules for everyone else. That tension was manageable for decades. It may not be manageable anymore. In February 2025, something happened that had never happened before in the 55-year history of the Clean Air Act. The Senate voted 51-44 to revoke California's vehicle emissions waivers. The Senate parliamentarian ruled the action unconstitutional. The Government Accountability Office agreed. Legal experts across the political spectrum warned that the procedure violated established law. The Senate voted anyway. This wasn't a policy disagreement. It was a direct assault on the mechanism that had allowed California to operate independently for half a century. The quiet exemption that let one state lead while others followed was suddenly visible, contested, and under attack. The implications extend far beyond tailpipe emissions. If one administration can revoke regulatory autonomy that's been granted for 50 years, the entire model of states as laboratories of democracy collapses. The same logic that justifies stripping California's environmental waivers could justify stripping any state's authority over anything. Republican states could use identical tactics to impose their policies nationally when they hold power. The system that let California innovate without formal authority worked because everyone agreed to let it work. That agreement is breaking. The sociologist Manuel Pastor at USC called California, America only sooner. It's not a compliment or a criticism, it's an observation about how change actually happens. Progressive legislation pioneered in California, minimum wage increases, environmental protection, LGBTQ+ rights, privacy laws, cannabis legalization, doesn't stay in California. It gets studied nationally. It gets copied. It sets precedents that other states follow years or decades later. California was first to legalize recreational cannabis in 2016. First to mandate corporate climate disclosure covering global supply chains in 2023. First to set separate vehicle emission standards for greenhouse gases in 2009. First to implement a state-level cap-and-trade emissions market in 2012. Each innovation preceded federal action by years. Some preceded federal action by decades. Some federal action never came at all. The innovation simply spread state by state until it became the default. This is why California's opposite status isn't really opposition. It's direction. The state doesn't resist the American trajectory, it previews it. Carrie McWilliams wrote in 1949 that California was where the lights went on all at once, in a blaze and never dimmed. 75 years later, the lights are still blazing. The fifth largest economy on Earth, growing faster than the nations ahead of it, powered by geography and immigration and a founding culture that never learned to wait for permission. Whether you love California or hate it, the state isn't just different. It's the rough draft of what America becomes next. The only question is whether the rest of the country follows or fights.